If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/audio.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Really excited about today's show. I just screwed that up. We got with us here John O'Rourke. And his website is johneo'rourke.com. And you can find him on Instagram at JOR Author on Instagram. And he contacts me out of the blue. And he says, hey, man, you know, I heard you talk about one of my publishers, you know. And he says, I wrote this book about Richard Biegenwald. Okay, and I said, Richard Biegenwald? I met Richard Biegenwald. So the book is called The Jersey Shore Thrill Killer. Richard Biegenwald, and it's by John O'Rourke. And there's going to be a link in the Opperman Report bookstore and also on our Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So, John, are you there? Okay. Still got you on mute, John. John, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I had you on mute there still. Sorry. So tell us about yourself, John. Who is John O'Rourke?
Well, thanks, Ed, first for having me. I appreciate it. I started as a New Jersey State Trooper back in June of 1985. From there, I went up, patrolled the rural mountains of Sussex County. State police up there are responsible for several towns. So that was the start of my career, a career that lasted 26 years, with a number of assignments, mainly in uniform, as what we call in the state police, the field operations. Worked some what we call plainclothes details along the way. Ended up becoming a squad supervisor and running a squad of 10 troopers for a good decade or more before moving on to headquarters, which was located down in the, I don't know if you're familiar with New Jersey, but down by the Arts Center. They opened up a new state police facility there, and I was instrumental in providing the security recommendations for that facility. And it was towards the end of my career that I decided to write a book on the Jersey troopers who died in the line of duty. So I spent a good 6 years researching what I had planned to be a book about the troopers, and it turned out to be two books. The publisher, the History Press, liked the idea, wanted to go with it, but they said it was too much for one book. So first book was titled Jersey Troopers, Sacrifice at the Altar of Public Service. That came out just the last year, 2010, the last year that I was with the organization. So it was actually a pretty good, entry, I should say exit for me from the organization. I paid tribute to the troopers who died in the line of duty, and I retired a year later. And then the second book came out after that. And so since my retirement in February 2011, I've been working as a security consultant. I'm the director of security of a high-end private country club, so I do private club security. And in addition to that, I've been writing two books. One is a true crime book, and the other one is a fiction book. And the Jersey Shore Thrill Killer was, I guess it came out in 2014. So, I guess I was doing that shortly after I left.
Oh, it's been out for a while then. Okay. So how old are you?
I am, 54.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm 54. I'm going to be 55 in November, and I can't remember either. As a matter of fact, I'll be 55 in September. I got the month wrong. I tell you, it's amazing how your memory starts to go. Okay, it's really cool. Now, while you were a cop in the Jersey State Troopers there, did you have any connection with the Biegenwald case around that time?
No, I did not. I came on in '85, and Biegenwald case didn't really crack into January of '83 with the discovery of the body of Anna Osowitz in Ocean Township.
Okay, so
it was just 2 years prior to me becoming a trooper.
Right. So then, give us an idea. Who was Richard Biegenwald and his crimes, and how did this guy get started?
Richard Biegenwald was a problematic individual almost from the get-go. As a small child, he displayed a lot of mental issues that at first the family kind of dismissed as just a problematic child. But as time went on, his mother sought out some medical help for him, and it was determined that he was a schizophrenic. And so he spent a lot of time in and out of mental institutions as a child. He, I guess when he was around 5 or so, he had tried to set himself on fire. And so he was starting to display some problematic signs that you see in these type of individuals that go on to become serial killers. He had a fascination with death. He showed cruelty towards animals, and he was just a problem individual from the get-go. But he was also a very bright individual. I had the opportunity to speak with his defense attorney, Lou Diamond, who knew him better than anyone, and spent a considerable amount of time with him. And he said he was the most intelligent man he ever met. So
really, because I've met Lou Diamond.
You met Lou Diamond?
Oh, sure, plenty of times. I take that as an insult. I think I'm a lot smarter than Biegenwald. I'm gonna have to call him up on that one.
Well, that is funny. Lou Diamond got connected with Richard Biegenwald. What happened was, in December of '58, Biegenwald committed his first murder. It was a robbery that didn't go wrong. I don't want to give away too much of the book, but if you read the book, he actually had intent to push his fantasies to the next level and take a life. And it happened in December of '58 with the killing of a man called Stephen Sladowski. And Biegenwald was sent to life in prison with the possibility of parole. For good, if he acted accordingly, and he'd get out on good behavior a number of years down the road. And even Sladowski's widow actually had pleaded for the court to have mercy on the young Biegenwald. So that sets the stage where Biegenwald is in Trenton State for a number of years, and I had an opportunity to speak with prison guards that actually were there with Biegenwald while he was in prison. And in the beginning, he was problematic, and did what he had to do. He had to establish himself in order to survive within the confines of a prison. But when it got to the point in time when he realized he wanted to get out on parole, he started to conform and act a certain way, which was he had foreshadowed that years prior when his mother had him committed to the boys' club in upstate New York, where he was very problematic there, and actually tried to escape from there and got a whole group of individuals to organize this mass escape. But once that went awry, he realized that he had to, in order to get out, he had to conform, and he ended up conforming, got out. They put him in mainstream school for a few years. But he soon dropped out, and that was the segue towards his first murder. But fast forward, he's in prison. He realizes once he's at the point where he's starting to become eligible for parole, he starts becoming a model prisoner, and then he gets released.
But you started telling that story because you were going to describe how he got connected to Lou Diamond.
Yes. So that leads up to his release. He gets released, and then about a year or two later, he picks up a hitchhiker, a young woman, early 20s, fair skin, dark hair, dark eyes, which tended to be the women that he was attracted to. Picks her up hitchhiking, and somewhere during the travel, she realizes this is not right. Something is really bad. She goes with her instincts, unlike the other victims that you'll read about in the book. She follows her instincts, and she jumps out of the car and flees. She gets away. She notifies the police. She gives a description of him. He was an individual that had reddish hair. Well, you met him, and he had these blue eyes. So she thoroughly describes Biegenwald. This happened in Staten Island. The Staten Island authorities put out a sketch. They soon figure it's Richard Biegenwald. He is on the run for a few years. He gets caught up at a raid in New York City and gets arrested. Lou Diamond, that's how Lou Diamond comes into the picture.
What year was that?
I'm sorry?
What year was that?
You're testing my memory now with my narrative.
Roughly.
This was about 75, 76.
Okay.
When he commits this assault on a woman, and authorities had it down as an attempted rape. Lou Diamond is sitting in his office in Staten Island one day. He gets a call. Now, he's very upfront. He gets a call. He tells me it's a call from an organized crime figure. The figure he won't mention by name, but he says it's an organized crime figure, asking him to represent Richard Biegenwald. He says that Biegenwald is working for him. This is the organized figure that's on the phone, and is a good guy, doesn't throw anyone under the bus, and see what you can do for him.
Now, did Diamond ever tell you off the record who this guy was?
No, he didn't.
Oh, really? Okay, I'd love to find out. Okay.
And quite frankly, if you told me in confidence, I wouldn't say anyway.
I know.
But so that is how he got the connection to Biegenwald, but that also will align later on in the story as the story unfolds, how through his conversations with his client, Diamond comes to believe that Biegenwald is working with organized crime as a hitman. And although the victims that the authorities will eventually come to know that are Biegenwalds, there are many more, according to Lou Diamond, that are out there.
Very interesting. So did you find out if
that's how we have that connection?
This organized crime figure, do we know if he was from Staten Island or from Brooklyn? Do we know what family he was from?
Again, it was from Staten Island, and Lou Diamond had represented a number of people that were, with criminal groups on the island. The particular group I don't recall, but even Lou Diamond has a relative, and I can't think of his name right off the bat. It's in my narrative that was a organized crime figure. It's his godfather, who's actually connected to the mob.
Well, Staten Island's a very small place, especially back in the 70s and the 80s. So all your neighbors, everybody, everybody knew somebody. It was such a small town back in those days.
Well, believe it or not, Lou Diamond actually lived on Sharrett's Road, and Biegenwald's mother lived at 420 Sharrett's Road. So they were, in essence, neighbors. Never knew them until they got the call, but they were a stone's throw from one another.
Very interesting. That same home where they found the bodies buried in the basement, right?
Correct. Well, no, not in the basement, in the backyard.
In the backyard. See, because now I'll tell the story now real quick, because I was at that home with Biegenwald and some guys from Tennessee. They were bringing some marijuana up from Tennessee, and I was there meeting with them, and we used Biegenwald's house. And also a guy from Staten Island named Pete Peaches that I've talked about before. Pete Peaches Stenistrud. he was a driver for some of the families in Staten Island too. He knew everybody, and a big guy, 6'5". And in the middle of all this, I didn't know Biegenwald at all, and I don't remember him having red hair. I don't recall that. It's a long time ago, you know. But he starts waving around a shotgun like a joke, you know. And he was just doing a lot of wacky stuff, like erratic behavior, you know. And as we were leaving, he did this thing out the front entrance. There was a little patio area that was walled in, and there might have been a bench there, but it was a little garden-type area. And he waves his arms around because he was very erratic and frantic that day. And he goes, "This is where we bury the bodies," you know, as a joke. And we just kind of chuckled, and we wanted to get out of there, you know. We just chuckled and left. And then years later, I found out from Tom and Pete that, yeah, this guy was a serial killer and had bodies buried at the house. But did they ever check the front? Do you know?
Well, you know, that's funny that that he said that to you, because he wasn't joking. He actually had bodies probably buried out there. But the interesting thing, when I asked James Fagan about this, there was a little bit of a power struggle that I talk about in the narrative between New York and New Jersey, and New York was very uncooperative. But so once they got the bodies, Jersey officials went over the river, and he doesn't know, James Fagan, on whether they actually ever dug into the basement. He doesn't believe that they did. So, from my understanding, the authorities never went into the basement.
Really? So then they could have dug in the front where he was mentioning, where he was joking about.
And what happened in the past is Biegenwald is known to have buried a body in a I think it's the Point Pleasant, in his apartment in Point Pleasant. He had buried a body temporarily in the basement, and eventually moved that body. So he is known to have buried bodies in basements, but they never looked at the basement at the mother's house.
Right, and he's also known to have moved bodies too, so he could have had them there for a little while and moved them. My God, what a fascinating! Hey, no, I don't recall him being like a big, strong, tough guy either. Was he short?
He was average height. I believe he's around 5'8", 5'9".
Yeah, he didn't strike me as like a guy that was a particular threat, or except for the shotgun, you know. But other than that, he just seemed like one of the guys. And Pete was so big and giant, such a big giant guy, he shadowed everybody. And the guys from Tennessee were kind of like my height. They were kind of like hippies, Vietnam vet type guys, and they were all smiling too when he was waving the shotgun. So no one took him serious. We immediately interpreted it as a joke, but.
Yeah, I think that also made it easier for him to meet and greet his victims. He wasn't a overbearing type of man. He from what I've spoken with people, he was very pleasant. He could be pleasant, and he wasn't intimidating whatsoever. So the his young victims didn't feel intimidated by him at all. But those that got to know him and knew that he didn't joke around. So like James Fagan joked that he got the impression that if Biegenwald said, "I'm going to kill you," he wasn't a joke. It wasn't just a statement. It was the fact he was going to kill you. And there was a couple witnesses that had actually witnessed the execution. People that lived in his apartment in Asbury Park, they actually had witnessed the murder of William Ward. Now, there was a struggle that took place outside, and Biegenwald shot the guy in the head. And they did not come forward at all because they were just in fear that they would be next.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could see that, too, because all those guys are pretty serious guys, the ones that I knew. And I'm sure all those guys on Staten Island were so serious back in those days, And
well, it's funny. That's to go back to the bodies that you say about transition.
Yeah,
I suspect that the two bodies that they did find was Maria Chilella and Deborah Osborne at the mother's house in Staten Island. That they were just buried there temporarily. They was 3 or 4 feet down. They were dismembered in bags, and I believe that was a temporary holding spot until he could move them.
How did they come about to catch him on these serial killings?
What happened was, in January of 1983, a couple kids were playing in a vacant lot behind Burger King, and they discovered the remains of a female.
On Staten Island or in Jersey?
This is in New Jersey, in Ocean
Jersey.
Township.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe it was on 35. They were playing in the lot. They discovered the body, and it was reported to police, and that's how the police discovered the body. And it remained. It was just a skeleton by the time they got it. So when it got onto the news later that night and the next day, Biegenwald's ex-girlfriend, a woman named Teresa Smith. Now, he was married, mind you, too, but he had a girlfriend as well. And at one time, the girlfriend and the wife were living together. But the girlfriend, Teresa Smith, had broken away from Biegenwald. But she knew that the body found in the lot was Biegenwald's victim. Matter of fact, he had brought Anna Osowitz home the evening of her death, and he had actually wanted Teresa to kill Anna in the garage. That was a test. So he actually had scooped Anna Osowitz up from the Asbury Park boardwalk, which is basically she was sitting right outside of the Stone Pony, and took her home to meet Teresa with the intent that Teresa would perform the execution, because they had been speaking about doing this for quite some time. I gather, although there's no proof that Biegenwald ever sexually assaulted any of his victims, I gather the relationship that he had with Teresa had some kind of sick connection to his victims, because if you look at his victims and you look at Teresa, she was very similar. She had that look. She was an attractive woman, early in her 20s, dark hair and brown eyes. So she looked just like his victims. But that's how. So she's sitting there. She sees the news, and she got scared that Biegenwald was going to, I guess, terminate her, because they were not together, and she was afraid that he'd come after her, but knowing that she actually knew and could put Biegenwald in connection with that body in that lot. So that's how she came forward.
So she went to the cops.
She went to the cops.
And then right away they pick him up. Did he confess?
Well, it was a strange story that I talk about in the book, where Teresa had a connection she was dating someone who had who knew a local police officer, and the story that she told about Richard Biegenwald was quite bizarre. He had a poisonous snake in his basement that he was extracting the venom out of the snake because they were going to poison people at the Monmouth Mall. He had a variety of guns and makeshift weapons and bombs that he was structuring. So it was a story that was so bizarre it wasn't really believable. So she had to really convince a friend to connect her with the police officer that it was actually a true story. And they met in the Monmouth Mall, and it took a while for her to convince the officer, his name was Bobby Miller, that this was actually a legit story. So they put that together. They interviewed her. They brought in the prosecutor, and then they determined that what they were going to do was they were, based on the information that she provided, that they were going to raid his apartment in Asbury Park, and that's how he was arrested, and that's how they come up with some information and some evidence in terms of guns, the snake, the bombs that he was constructing in the basement with a man called Darren Fitzgerald.
Hey, Darren Fitzgerald, is he alive today?
Well, when last I checked, he was living in Florida, but I was unable to make contact with him. Really? Now, so
right? Did he do any time? Did he get arrested too?
He did. He did some time, yeah. But he eventually, what happened was in January, I think it was January 22nd, the body is found, let me see, I think I have the date here. The body is found January 14th in the Burger King parking lot. On the 22nd, they raid Biegenwald's apartment. And then the case goes dry. The only thing they have him connected with is Anna's death and that coupled with the witness Teresa's testimony. So they have nothing to go on, if not for Darrell Fitzgerald coming forward 2 months later, actually a couple months later in April, second week of April, he comes forward saying he'll give up additional bodies on where he helped Biegenwald bury the bodies for a plea deal, because they were charging him with the murder of Anna as well, and his account was that all he did was help Biegenwald bury the body. He had no involvement in the murder.
Wow, so this guy Fitzgerald, he was working on these bombs. He was working on a snake poison deal, all this stuff. He's helping burying bodies, but they let him out of prison. Huh? He's out walking around living in Florida, huh?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, they let him out. Yep.
Do we know how many years he got?
I don't. I believe I mentioned that in the book, but I'm not sure. Right off the hand, I don't remember.
Hey, well, give me an idea. Like over 10 years, you think? Was it something? Did it strike you as being a long amount of time or a short amount of time?
I think it did. I think it did 10 years.
See, I'll tell you something. The guy who was bringing the pot up from Tennessee, Tom McMahon, he went to prison for possession of marijuana down in Tennessee. I think he got 25 to life for marijuana. And there's this other guy digging up bodies, moving around with snakes and bombs and stuff like that. This guy's walking around.
Well, you're right. I made a lot of arrests as a trooper, and a lot of drug arrests, and they do come down very hard, believe it or not, in Jersey with drug offenders that I've seen get, a considerable amount of time, longer than that. But he was out within 10. But he also helped recover a few bodies and close a couple cases.
Yeah, I think Tom tried to help make a couple of cases, too. I didn't think it worked out too well. Let me take a commercial break here. We're with John O'Rourke, and his website is johneo'rourke.com, where you could find his different books. He got a book about the fallen New Jersey State police officers dying in the line of duty. But the book we're talking about today is called The Jersey Shore Thrill Killer. It's about Richard Biegenwald. Fascinating stuff. All this Staten Island stuff really gets to me. And you can find him on Instagram at JOR Author on Instagram. Do you post a lot of selfies there on your Instagram page, John?
No, I don't. But I do post some pictures of me, and I manage it, but also I have my son helps me with it as well, because he's in the creative field, so he kind of helps me along.
Your son didn't follow and become a cop?
No, my son is working for Warner's studio. He didn't follow in his father's footsteps. Thank God.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about him.
Yeah, especially since you wrote those books about all those Jersey Trooper cops dying. I'm sure that must have had some kind of effect on you, when you're dwelling on all that stuff.
Well, it's funny. It did, and then towards the end of my career, my son said to me, he says, "Hey, Dad, wouldn't it be funny?" Because I had a couple close calls, and he goes, "Dad, wouldn't it be funny that you got killed in the line of duty and you wrote books about troopers that died in the line of duty?" And then I said, "You know what? It's time for me to leave, because that would be ironic." Yeah. So I retired.
Probably would have sold a lot of books, though, man. Okay, listen. Thank God you didn't. Thank God you got out all right. John, before we get into the trial, and I think there was a lengthy appeal on this case too, if my memory serves correct, because one of my professors, when I was at the College of Staten Island, was Eric Gansberg, and he said he worked on this case. He ghost wrote everything. The guy was bragging about everything all the time. But what caused you to be attracted to the Richard Biegenwald story?
Well, it's an interesting connection here to why I chose Biegenwald. I'd written 2 books about the state police, and when I had submitted my first proposal to a publisher, I did a couple different publishers. I had a publishing company in southern New Jersey, and then the History Press came along, so I ended up taking that. But the connection that I had with Plexus came through a friend, and I had spoken with the friend that, I never followed up with the individual. He was very nice. I probably should have said, thank you. I appreciate your consideration, but And I didn't. I did nothing. There was no correspondence for about a year. So I said that I didn't feel right about that. And she's like, he's a great guy. Just send him an email. He knows he's a publisher. Send him a copy of the book. And, long story short, that person and I became friends. So we were having lunch one day and we're talking. And I said that I wanted to write a book on history. I love the Revolutionary War. So I'm thinking about writing a book about the Revolutionary War. And he said to me, he says, you can't do that. And I said, why? He says, you wrote 2 books about true crime, meaning the state police stories. You need to stay in that niche until you get yourself established. You just can't change. You got yourself a publisher. You have 26 years of experience that many true crime writers do not have. And he says, you need to take that momentum and move forward with it. So it took me a good year because I wasn't passionate about writing about true crime at all. So when I started researching, I started doing about serial killers, and every book that I looked at had Richard Biegenwald's name in it. Some was just a reference or two, others would have a paragraph, and others had a few pages. So now I said, let me see if anyone had ever written anything about the man, and they never did. So there was no books that were published about Biegenwald. So then I said, all right, that's a great book to write on. So that's how the Richard Biegenwald narrative came about.
Yeah, he didn't make a lot of even press back then. There was press about it, but it wasn't like a big deal on the news every night on the ABC and NBC and stuff like that. The local Staten Island paper had a lot about it. Now, did he confess it all, or he fought it at trial?
Well, this is another interesting story that I found about when I did the research. What happened was when he got arrested, now he would not cooperate whatsoever, but he did not want the death penalty. And the prosecutor, a man named Al Lear, who was known as Hollywood Al, because he was always getting himself in the paper. He'd take his department what the prosecutor's office was doing, and he was always meeting at the press and letting them know. So that's how he got the name Hollywood Al. He pursued the death penalty, and Biegenwald, according to Lou Diamond, was afraid of the death penalty. He did not want the death penalty. So believe it or not, this man was taking lives, but he was afraid of death. So what happened was Biegenwald approaches Diamond and says, I will give up a number of bodies in order to take the death penalty off the table. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy here on the number of bodies. That's interesting. Lou Diamond, the defense attorney, claims that it was 25 bodies that Biegenwald was going to come forward with if they would take the death penalty off the table. James Fagan, the assistant prosecutor, remembers it being 75 bodies.
Really?
Yes. So, either way, it's a considerable amount of victims that this man, was responsible for. And believe it or not, the Monmouth County prosecutor turned down that. He wanted to pursue the death penalty, so he didn't take the plea bargain. So Diamond, to this day, is very upset about that because he says, his goal wasn't to get Biegenwald found not guilty. He knew the man was guilty of sin. His goal was to get the death penalty taken away and getting a life sentence on it. That was his goal, and it was a perfect opportunity to close those cases out and put some closure to families, and it wasn't taken by the prosecutor.
So how many bodies was he convicted on? 6 or something like that, right?
He was convicted of killing 6, but we know that there was a few other people that he was responsible for.
Amazing. No, what about this other guy? This guy Fitzgerald. Did anybody ever talk to him about these other bodies? He
was only involved with the helping to bury the bodies of Biegenwald's, what they call the thrill killings, the women. The one that wasn't a thrill killing was William Ward, who was executed on the front yard of the Asbury Park home. That was over a drug dispute gone bad, and as you know, because you worked a case involving a drug deal with Biegenwald. It went bad. Fitzgerald was actually in a physical confrontation with William Ward, and Biegenwald simply walked out the door and put a .22 next to the guy's head and pulled the trigger.
What kind of drugs? What kind of drugs was it? Do you know?
It was actually the drugs. I don't know specifically on the drugs, but this was a drug deal that had already been completed,
right.
And the argument was over the money. The argument was over the money, how much money that how they were going to divide up the money.
Now, how did he how was he able to retain Lou Diamond? Did he have money to retain him, or was Lou Diamond appointed by the court?
Lou Diamond was obtained through Biegenwald's father, left him a considerable amount of money, over $100,000. Excuse the phone for ringing in the background.
We can't hear.
Over $100,000. So that's how he was able to have Lou Diamond as his attorney.
Okay, and they got a conviction on him because if Fitzgerald came in and testified against him. That's the only thing they really had?
Yes, well, they had the bodies that were produced as a result of it. So they had his testimony, and then they had the bodies.
Wait, wasn't there a secret?
They had the physical evidence in the house. They had the .22 that had the forensics came back that the bullet used in the killing of Anna Oslowitz came from the .22 that was recovered in Biegenwald's apartment.
Wasn't there like a secret room too in all this?
They had a secret passageway that went from the living room down into the basement.
This guy's like a full-time, just working on this stuff full-time. It just blows my mind. Now,
he was not your typical serial killer, because most serial killers, his thrill killings were all, that was the serial killer part of the man. That his girlfriend described it as it was him. He would act like a woman on PMS. He would be all miserable, and he would have to go out and commit a thrill killing to feel better. That's how she described it. So the other killings were all methodical, none that we know of, other than John Petrone, who was shot when they were shooting, and he executed him. But the way that body was recovered was done in such a poor way by the prosecutor's office that they couldn't proceed with that conviction.
But now, and by the way, too, this wasn't his first murder conviction, right? He had a murder conviction when he was a young man in Tennessee, I think, right?
No, he killed his first victim, Stephen Slodowski, in December of 1958 in Bayonne.
And he got out of that. How many years did he do on that?
17.
17 years this guy does, but yet he can come out and have all these guns, a convicted felon carrying all these firearms galore. Did he have any minor arrests like DUIs or domestic violence or possession charges, anything like that, any little stuff?
The only thing that he had was that incident where he was accused of picking up the hitchhiker and trying to sexually assault her.
Fascinating. Now, what about, was there lengthy, is my memory correct, there were lengthy appeals and all this? What were they trying to rid the death penalty, I guess, well,
there was. He got found guilty, and he got the death penalty, and the appeal process was all about the death penalty, which ultimately was taken away, and he got life in prison.
Okay, and did Lou Diamond ever mention?
Diamond and his team achieved their objective.
Diamond and his team.
Getting him life in prison.
Did Diamond ever mention the name Eric Gansberg involved in any of this?
That doesn't sound familiar to me.
Okay. Yeah, I sent you the link to the guy. Now, that's very interesting. Now, what about his time in prison? Was he up to his death?
He was a loner. He established himself very early on. Now, don't forget that he spent 17 years in Trenton State. So when he came back, there was still some lifers there that knew the man. So he had established himself a reputation. And for those individuals that didn't know who he was, he would show them in a very brutal way who he was. He spent a lot of time in solitary confinement.
Really? Okay. And then he died of natural causes?
He died of cancer. He was a heavy chain smoker.
And I guess back then you could still smoke in prison, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah, I spoke with one of the prison guards who said his cell looked like it looked like fog. That's how much cigarette smoke was in his cell.
Oh my God. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you that you want to add to this story?
Just that it's amazing how, if not for his girlfriend coming forward, he would not have been caught. Even though that was probably not prudent of him to dump the body where he did. He did it at a time during the summer where the weeds were high. Right. So it wasn't discovered until the winter when everything had thinned out. But there was no evidence left that would really pinpoint anyone to who he was. So that's what's amazing about it, that he was that brilliant that he was able to kill these victims without anyone being able to tie any evidence back to him. And my speculation is ultimately Fitzgerald would have ended up a victim.
Wow. And these 25 these other murders, the 25 to the 75 bodies. Now, were those murders that then he disposed of the bodies too, or were they like just hit and shoot them in drive-bys, stuff like that?
There's a couple of things. Diamond says that he was told by Biegenwald that what he would do is he would test these weapons out. They had recovered in the apartment cigarette lighters that had been converted over to .22 caliber guns that actually worked, because one was actually shot off in the apartment by mistake for someone trying to light a cigarette, believe it or not. So Diamond says that he would practice making these weapons, and then what he would do is he would go into the city and he would shoot prostitutes.
Really?
And he said he would then the hits that he would do, he would dump in the Pine Barrens and off Sandy Hook.
Wow.
In addition to that, Diamond was sent while Biegenwald. This is after his conviction and his time in prison now for the serial killings. He was sent a manifesto confessing to not confessing. I misspoke there. Talking about in vague terms about all these bodies that are missing on milk cartons, these victims.
Yeah. He
came up with numbers. The number of people that are missing vis-a-vis that are shown on milk cartons and that are never found. What do you think happens to them? And he alluded to some organization selling body parts overseas, killing people and sending the body parts overseas. So Diamond believes that he was involved in that business.
Really? So he was involved in kidnapping little kids and harvesting their organs to ship overseas.
That's what Biegenwald had alluded to Diamond, and Diamond to this day believes that that's the case.
When's the last time you talked to Diamond?
About a year and a half ago.
Okay. Very interesting. I wasn't aware of any of that stuff.
It's an interesting story, but you know, one of the frustrating parts about my research on this is he never spoke about his killings whatsoever, and those people that knew about it weren't long for this earth. So that's why there's very little known about the man, and he didn't want to talk about it. There was an opportunity. HBO had approached Lou Diamond about doing a special on Richie Biegenwald, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it. So he went to the grave with his methodology and how he killed his victims and how many victims he's responsible for. No one will know.
Fascinating stuff, my friend. I can't thank you enough. And you're sending me a book, right? Already?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can't wait to get it. I can't. If not, I was just going to order it. Okay. So
don't do it. There's one in the mail.
I cost you one sale. Okay. Sorry. May 24th, 7 p.m. Now you're going to be at the Long Branch Library in Long Branch, New Jersey, giving a presentation on this.
I am. Yes.
Excellent. I encourage people to go out there and check that out. JohnEO'Rourke.com is the website. You can find him on Instagram. He has all these selfies on there at JOR Author. And the book is called Jersey Shore thrill killer Richard Biegenwald. John, thank you so much, my friend. I really appreciate this. I really appreciate you finding me and reminding me of all this stuff. It's been a real excitement, and bringing back these old memories, living the old days. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate your time.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Okay, they got John O'Rourke, the Jersey thrill killer, Richard Biegenwald. I told you a story about how I ran into Biegenwald. I wasn't worried about it because I had Pete with me there. Pete was so loyal to me. Pete was a 6'6" and 300 pounds, and he would never let anybody harm me in any possible way. So, and when I saw Tom laughing, I knew there was no problem. But there was another incident we had. It might have been the same day. Who knows? I think I told the story about Pete Peaches, a guy I loved. And Pete was in and out. We used to call him Pete the Nut because he was in and out of the South Beach Psychiatric Center. He had this ID card. If he got arrested for anything, they'd put him in there and let him out in a couple of days. I got so many stories I could tell you about all this. But there was another occasion where we were meeting Tom from Tennessee and his friends from Tennessee. And Pete was driving, and Pete had this old beat up car, and so, we had to do our little meeting there, and we come back out, and we're trying to be, low key, keep a low profile, we don't want anybody noticing us. And we come out, and there's Pete the Nut running around in a circle in the parking lot of this apartment building, screaming at the top of his lungs, because while we were upstairs, the car was overheating, so Pete undid the radiator cap and all the steam came out and burned his arm and the side of his face and his shoulder. The guy, he showed me, we left immediately, to go take him someplace and hose him down. This big wild man. But, and he showed me the scars later on. He had all these I had to take him to the hospital, man. This is a wacky crew, and I told the story too in the past too about how I had that dynamite. And the guys who brought up the dynamite were the guys from Tennessee, too. They were the ones that were bringing up the dynamite from Tennessee, which really saved my life one time because I was in a car with these the Brooklyn Colombo family guys who were into extorting people and stuff like that. And I took the opportunity to see if they wanted to buy any dynamite. And after that, they never bothered me. It was this lunatic with wants to sell dynamite, up in Staten Island and Brooklyn. It wasn't a common thing up there, unless you were Biegenwald, I guess. A couple of funny stories about Lou Diamond. One time, we had a friend who needed an attorney. And because I was a paralegal and a private investigator, and everybody knew I knew all the lawyers on Staten Island, they came to me and they need an attorney. So I said, okay, we'll send you over to Lou Diamond. Okay, he's going to take care of you. We had our friend call Lou Diamond, make the little introduction there. Sure, have your friend come down. I'll meet him about his case. And Lou Diamond starts yelling at the kid, telling him to get a haircut, and throws his paperwork back at him and says, go get a haircut and then come back. Right? And you got to remember, Lou Diamond was the best man at my lawyer's wedding, and they were best man for each other. And these are powerful lawyers on Staten Island. Right now, today, they're forget it. I can only imagine what kind of stuff they can pull off these days. But back in those days, they were powerful lawyers. And so our friend who went to see Lou Diamond said, he cursed me out. He threw the paperwork at me. He tells me to get a haircut, get out of his office. He goes, and then he comes around his desk, and he's wearing a suit and a tie, and a jacket and suit pants. And I look down at his feet, and he got no socks on. He's wearing flip-flops on his feet. No explanation. We don't know what that was or why, but that's a true story, okay? One more I got for you. It's not funny, but just to give you an idea of some of the wackiness and the craziness from my childhood on Staten Island. I had a friend in high school named Louis LaCastro, and you can look that up. You can look up his name. And Louis married this woman, and I guess she had a little bit of mental illness or something. And they had a couple of kids, and she was pregnant, but wasn't showing. He didn't know she was pregnant. They get on a plane to fly to California. She gets up. She goes into the lavatory, the bathroom on the plane, and she gives birth there on the plane, and she takes the baby, the newborn infant, and shoves the baby into the trash container on the plane to get rid of the baby or kill the baby or whatever. Goes back to a seat, acts like nothing happens. I guess some people saw traces of this. They found the baby. Well, who knows what happened? But I believe the baby did die. Okay? And Lou Diamond was the attorney for that case for my friend Louis LaCastro in that. So, involved in a lot of stuff. A lot of cases I worked and stuff like that he was involved in, and of course, my attorney. And Eric, who claimed... Eric was my professor at the College of Staten Island, who claimed that he did all the appellate work. He goes through all the appellate work, but who knows? He was always bragging about stuff. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating times, guys, I could go on. I could tell you stuff for hours about this. I know people like to hear it. But I really didn't enjoy John O'Rourke. Brought back a lot of memories for me. Just contact me out of the blue. Really weird. His website is johneo'rourke.com. You could find his book on Amazon. The Jersey Shore Thrill Killer, Richard Biegenwald. Maybe I'll write a book about Biegenwald, and I'll throw in my stories about him. I wouldn't mind that. I had no idea about these 25 bodies or these 75 bodies, but I think that Pete would know because they all knew each other. They all knew each other well. And there was no secret what everybody was doing. Everybody was all up to kind of shenanigans and doing all kinds of stuff. So I can't imagine that some of these killings were a secret from Pete. But what are you going to do? Life goes on. If you like today's show, okay, we go to our member section, OppermanReport.com. There's much more content in there. People like the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. Pretty much the first guy started talking about it on the air. When I wanted to do my first Jeffrey Epstein show, I looked around for a guest. I couldn't find anybody who was familiar with the topic. I went all over YouTube and all that. And now you think everybody knows about him. Everybody's an expert on the case now. Aren't they all experts? Okay. Well, good for you.